Today we're learning about this guy who was an innovative thinker. He was a problem solver, and his pens are one of the most highly respected pens to date. Let's learn his story on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Louis Edson Waterman was born in 1837 in New York. He married twice, and he had 7 children, but 2 died as babies. His dad was one of the most successful wagon makers in his area, but unfortunately his dad died at the age of 26 when Louis was just 3 years old. I can't find any documentation on how he died, whether it was just a sickness or an accident of some kind that killed him. Louis had 2 brothers, Daniel and Elisha, and his mom Amanda was a well-known tailor, and a few years later she got remarried to the village blacksmith. Now, Louis was very motivated to learn, and he would often fit in reading in between his chores, and he'd often study by candlelight. When he was 15, he went to seminary school, and when he was 16, he went to Illinois with his stepdad, and he would teach school during the winters, and he worked carpentry during the summers. At some point, he began studying the Isaac Pitman phonography, which I thought had to do with phonographs, but actually it's a form of shorthand. He read and studied textbooks to the point where he was so expert on the subject that he taught it at the University of Virginia just before the Civil War. Quick side note, speaking of Civil War, Louis's brother Daniel died in action during the Civil War, and he was only 24. His other brother Elisha died pretty young too. He was only 42. Louis ended up living the longest out of his siblings, and he lived to be 63. So Louis moved to Boston, and he sold life insurance for a while, for Aetna. And while he was there, he had many innovative ideas. For example, he drew up documents that would illustrate comparisons between different plans. These methods are still used today. He sold insurance for about 8 years, and he was credited with building the company up so much that his Boston branch was worth more than the total of the company when he started. But then he struggled with health problems, so he ended up moving on to his next adventure. He enjoyed coming into situations where he could work out problems, figure out where the other people failed. He had that kind of mind that when he entered a situation, he was constantly trying to figure out how to streamline it. He moved to New York, and his next adventure ended up being in the pen business. So we're up to about 1883, and Louis Waterman is now about 46 years old. Understandably, people were very frustrated with pens at the time, when they would unexpectedly leak or drip ink at the most inopportune times. So according to the company website, Waterman finally had it when he tried to close on a big sale of some fountain pens when the client decided not to buy it because when he tested it, the pen leaked. Well, there's a problem that needed fixing. The following year, in 1884, he patented the first successful fountain pen. It was called the Waterman Ideal Fountain Pen. Nearly 200 fountain pens had been patented by this time, but Waterman's pen featured a 3-fissure feed system. This prevented the unexpected drips or discharge of ink when in use. I found a website that uses the term capillary action. Capillary action means that the surface of the paper pulls the ink out of the pen as air moves up the pen through a slit in the nib and the air channel in the feed, resulting in a satisfyingly smooth flow of ink across your page. Now, this pen came with a dropper so that you could refill the ink. Here's a picture of one believed to be the oldest surviving Waterman pen. Waterman Fountain Pen Company was founded right around this time as well. In 1888, the company's name changed to L.E. Waterman Company. In 1900, Waterman receives the Gold Medal of Excellence at the Paris Exposition. So 15 years after he started, in 1900, 7 out of 10 writing utensils were Waterman's. Unfortunately, Waterman died in 1901 at the age of 63. His death certificate and obituary say that the cause of death was dysentery and catarrh trouble. And catarrh means inflammation in the breathing passages. This guy had some confidence though. By the time he died, he had popularized the phrase, the daddy of them all. I like this guy. Here's the Waterman building in 1906. And here it is now. Notice this part of the building is still here, but this chunk is different. Is it just me, or does the old way look better? And here's the Boston office in 1924, and here it is today. It's still standing. So when Lewis Waterman died, his nephew Frank D Waterman became president of the company. Now, some really interesting things came up in the paper regarding Frank. For one thing, in 1925, he was the Republican nominee for mayor. Here was the competitors. He's the one on the very left. And doesn't the guy in the middle look like Tom Hanks? And then the guy on the right looks like Robin Williams? Well, he didn't win. Tom Hanks won. Frank had two sons, Elisha and Frank Jr. In 1926, we see a fight between Frank and one of his sons, Elisha, over money. Apparently, Elisha married a girl that his dad did not approve of, so he got cut off. He got fired from his position at the Waterman Company and cut off from the family fortune. This article is talking about how in Lewis Waterman's will, Lewis left the company to Frank, his nephew, but if Elisha was to outlive his dad, then he was to inherit the income his father would have been entitled to. Frank Jr. wasn't born yet when Lewis wrote his will. And this is just an absolute horrible picture of this guy in the paper. I mean, wow. So, anyways, they were fighting over money. Elisha was only married to this girl for about 5 years before she died of a sleeping powder overdose. But even after that, they still didn't talk for over 15 years. Well, Frank Sr. died in 1938, so Elisha, who had been flat broke, he said he was living in poverty, working as a dishwasher, was presenting his case to inherit his portion of the family fortune, which would have been over $5 million. The following year, Elisha's mom died, and in her will, she left him $100. One paper says that no one was going to be fighting him on this case, so I guess he probably got it. The papers never say solidly if he got it or not. By the way, when Frank died, Frank Jr. became president of the company, and he was executor of his parents' wills. Where there's money, there's drama, right? Well, in 1926, about 10 years before Frank Sr. died, a guy named Jules Fagard created the Jif Waterman Company in France, and he begins manufacturing Waterman pens there in France. Then a year after Frank Jr. became president in 1939, the company launched a pen with a unique 100-year warranty. By 1950, this article says that they were producing $1 ballpoint pens all the way up to $250 diamond-studded luxury pens. This is in 1950. This article also mentions that during World War II, the soldiers demanded pens so they could write to their families. The Waterman Company was bought by Gillette in 1987. Nowadays, to pen enthusiasts, Waterman pens are now valued as luxury gifts or collector's items. Owning a Waterman pen is a status symbol, and each pen is a prized possession, according to the website. There's not quite as much literature on Waterman's inks. The bottle that I have looks like this one, produced during the 20s and 30s. By 1935, this design was changed to this more unique shape. Earlier bottles look like these, and date from the 1910s to the early 20s. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you have a great Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.